Welcome back, everybody. Aaron from the Ones Ready and War Room podcast. I had the distinct privilege and honor to guide a long-form discussion between two Navy SEALs that have dedicated their entire personal and professional lives to making sure that you succeed. We touched on topics from training methodologies, the numbers that you need to hit to be successful, diet, nutrition, spiritual preparation, mental preparation, the whole thing. An Air Force PJ and two Navy SEALs walk into a bar. It sounds like a joke, but this conversation is for you if you're looking for that motivation to succeed and achieve your dreams. Jake Zweig and Mr. Nichols, Jeff Nichols, they both served on East Coast SEAL teams before they parted ways with the United States Navy to take on what they both do now, which is engage with you and help you achieve the goal that you are trying to get, whether that's law enforcement, first responders, some sort of special operations career and beyond. Mr. Nichols and Mr. Zweig, they are 100% the subject matter enthusiast that you need. I just want to say thanks to these two great men. We had a great conversation. I learned a lot, and I can't wait for you guys to listen to this entire thing. Thanks so much for following along. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And without further ado, Mr. Jeff Nichols, Mr. Jake Zweig, take it away. Thanks so much, everybody. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe wherever you see this. So what's up, everybody? You guys heard the intros. It's a funny joke that we were talking about right before we hopped onto this bad boy. Is like, you look at it and it sounds like a joke that your dad would say, right? Like two Navy SEALs and a PJ walk into a bar and then some terrible joke follows. But welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining this conversation. I can't wait to get into it. We've got Jake Zweig. We've got Jeff Nichols, titans in the SEAL community of their own right. I'm excited to have you guys. How are you guys doing today?
Good. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron, man. I can't be more honored to be on here with Warriors, and we're going to get a little bit of information out there, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're going to dive into it. Jeff, I'm going to open the floor to you, man. I just wanted you to give us a background on how it is you found yourself in the specific area that you are, because we're all kind of like swimming in the same circles, hoping and praying that we get one of those 23% of the United States population that can actually qualify for the military. Man, we're looking for that 1% of the 1% that can do the jobs that we have. So, Jeff, over to you. Give us a background, brother.
I think mine's probably really similar to like this is like going to be redundant, right? Like I was a college athlete that was really athletic, but not specifically talented, like overly talented in the sport to keep me in that sport. So baseball was my kind of my sport that paid my way to college and whatnot. And ironically enough, like my passion for training kind of was my way. Like I was a very small, very, very small child. Like I graduated high school. I wrestled 103 pounds my senior year. I magnanimously overcompensated for that with a huge chip on my shoulder and hard work. But it kind of, that hard work stuck with me in college. And when my baseball time ended, I became a strength coach at Troy University. I managed 14 varsity sports. And while I was there finishing up my undergrad and went into grad school there, 9/11 happened. And so like there was that compulsion that was like, always wanted to serve and wanted to, like, the whole Navy SEAL thing was kind of on the forefront of like what I wanted to do, but baseball was always the thing in the way. But after I stopped playing and then 9/11 happened, it was like a no-brainer. I originally was going to OCS. I pulled out of OCS and enlisted and spent 11 years in the SEAL teams. I spent my last 8 years at Dev Group and just kind of bounced around with, like, when I got out of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And, you know, you kind of get out and there's a lot of leads and there's not a lot of passion behind it, at least for me, but the calling to go back to coach and teaching, because I learned so much of the command from a perspective standpoint, like obviously the doing, but I got to see a lot of really fantastic human beings achieve some fantastic things. I thought physically, mentally, all those sort of things. And that was all kind of combined within like, now like, okay, how do I continue to give back? And I guess my last kind of reason is I was privy to Marcus Luttrell's kind of conundrum of getting out. I had my Master Chief at SEAL Team 5 just happened to be literally like in the armory over in Ramadi, Iraq, when like Marcus was really torn, like wanted to stay in, wanted to go to Dev Group, but his physical body was failing him, specifically like his intestinal tract and things like that. And I remember the Master Chief at the time, it was a former Dev Group guy, he said, you know, as Marcus, he goes, if you really want to make an impact in the community, you do it by getting out. And so we all know what his career went on to do. And that seed got planted, but fast forward 10 years later, I get out of the command and like that same sort of thought process was ringing through my head of like, I still had this calling to contribute with these skills I had gotten, with this background as a strength coach, And this observational sort of, I worked and saw with heroes. I worked with heroes, you know? And so that's where all this for me comes from, is trying to, I have this huge passion for people like me. Like, we were all talking off camera before this, is like, not everyone can do this, but the ones that can do it, like, you can see yourself in them, this little reflective mirror. And like, when you're around them, you just want to give them everything you can. And I think that's where it comes from for me.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, there was something that was said to me not too long ago, and somebody said, you know, when you took that oath of enlistment, and I did so 4 or 5 times, the last one indefinitely before I hit my retirement earlier this year. They said the oath of enlistment and that willingness to support and defend the Constitution and to pour into the younger generation, that doesn't have a time limit. So for you to have that calling, for you to consistently have that calling, it's obvious that you internalize that. How did you feel about that decision as you made that transition out and as you started finding different ways to serve, specifically through preparation? Did you feel like you made the right decision?
Yeah, truth be told, like I always tell people, like, the best decision I ever made for my military career is to get in. And the second best decision was to get out when I felt I was ready to get out. Like, I again had that thought. I was like, you know, I could spend another 9 years in and retire. And quite frankly, I didn't see a lot of super happy Master Chiefs. Like, there was just, we were tired, right? And so, like, I thought, like, I could spend the 9 years working my way up and become a Master Chief probably, or I could spend the next 9 years of trying to build something I'm passionate about where I still had some youth. And now it's been about 11 years since I've gotten out, 10 years, and I can look back now and go, yeah, like, I'm thankful that I spent those remaining 9, 10 years of doing what I'm doing now, instead of, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm sure my career would have been like fulfilling in a way, but I didn't financially, because I had finished college and been to grad school and things like that. I was like, I did all that before. I'm so thankful. That's one thing. I'm glad I finished college before I went in. Like, so I got out and I could just thrust myself into the workforce with the same kind of zest that I had becoming a SEAL, I guess.
Sure. And they say when you know, that's the most true statement ever. And I love that statement of, you know, getting into the military was the best decision I ever made. The second best was knowing when to step away and when that's appropriate.
Yep.
Jake, we're going to turn it over to you, brother. For those of you that don't know Jake Zweig, tell us about who you are, how it is that you got into your space now, and a little bit about your background and what brought you where we are.
So I like to tell people I grew up really country. I'm the only African-American in my whole family out of like 74 people coming out of Washington State. My dad went to prison for 4 years. So I had quite the rough and tumble upbringing, but every one of my friends' dads were in the military. So we had 2 regimental sergeant majors. We had 2 battalion sergeant majors. So I grew up in the Army on South Fort Lewis in the Ranger Training Center. You know, the A-team was rolling. I was going to the military no matter what. I got a full college scholarship, so I didn't learn how to read until college. And that kind of drove me into math and science heavy. So I'd won the University of Washington Science Fair 3 years in a row in the 8th grade and got a full scholarship to the University of Washington. I leveraged that to get into the Naval Academy as a freshman. And then I got into West Point as a sophomore and still didn't understand that one was the Navy and the other one was the Army. And they both were military academies. And I picked the one with sailboats.
That's fantastic. I'll tell you what, I never thought I'd hear a Navy SEAL flex that he was a science fair champion, but here we are.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You know,
bro, crushed it.
But that's near and dear to my heart because my background is organic chemistry. But I'm, you know, so I get it. I totally get it.
Hey, let me tell y'all something. I had a microscope in my house, and I would go down and get water samples and crush some organic chemistry cells on stuff. I forgot to send Jeff a shout out. So I have 4 Division I strength coaches in the military right now, and I'm sure. Have you crossed paths with Rusty Witt?
Oh, I messaged him today. I found out that he got married. Just got married, and he's gonna have a kid in December. So yeah, I actually talked to him today.
yeah. Rusty Witt is my man now. So
he was
it's
the
just
strength
interesting.
Coach at Troy. My alma mater. So yeah, small world for sure.
Yeah, I shot a TV show or a Geico commercial with him down when he was at Lafayette, and we had an awesome time. But anyway, I want to send a shout out to you because I didn't realize you were a strength coach, and that's awesome. So anyway, I went to the Naval Academy, didn't know how to read. That was probably a problem. And I wasn't recruited for sports. I won a state championship in wrestling. I was all league nose guard. I showed up to camp 5'7", 171 pounds, and got the starting job in prep school as a nose guard. And I made a life decision that eating food was a lot better than not eating food. I wrestled that year. I lost one match. I went like 16-1. And then I got to the Naval Academy. I played football for the first 3 years. We lost a lot of games. It was horrendous on my soul because I felt like the coaches were absolutely working against us, which they were. They sucked. And so I lost 65 pounds. I went from 245 down to 167, got the varsity 167 spot my junior year. And then the bad defensive line coach that I had got fired or left. And I came back out for football my senior year. And I was 5'7", 200-pound nose guard, but I was 7th on the team in tackles. So I lit fire as a midget playing Division I nose guard.
Just built like a fire hydrant. Like where do you hurt a fire hydrant? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wanted to go SEALs out the Naval Academy. To say I was in some trouble would be an understatement. I graduated with 290 days on restriction, all of it incredibly stupid stuff, like disrespecting a foreign national for talking to me in Arabic when I asked him, can you please tell me what you want in English? That got me 90 days of restriction at the good old Naval Academy. But I didn't get what I wanted. So I had to do what I do, man. And I tell a lot of people, man, I might not get what I want immediately, but I'm going to get what I want in the long term. So I came up with a plan. I went to the USS Merrimack, the worst ship in the Navy. I gave up all my leave. I showed up the day after graduation to boat driver school. I got to my ship. I got qualified in the 18-month qualification. I got it done in 4 months. And Margaret Fuller, who is the SEAL community manager, who was maybe the baddest person in the SEAL community, ran the SEAL community with an iron fist for 45 years, had told me, when your package hits my desk, I'm picking you up. So my package hit her desk. She picked me up. I spent another 18 months on the USS Marisnax, honing my awesome leadership, because you're on a ship with a bunch of worse people. Everybody on my ship had been fired, all the chiefs. I had a chief. My chief had 7 DUIs. Okay. So kind of driving towards what you asked, how did I find myself in the position that I'm in? Like, I love Jeff's response, right? Like, it was a calling. And one of the things that I didn't understand when I was younger is, like, I have the natural ability to lead because I don't really do a lot of BS. There's not a lot of fluff in my life, and I don't ask for fluff, and I don't have any pomp and circumstance. You know, like I told you, my dad's a truck driver, bro. Like,
so was mine.
Like, I communicate.
41 years, yeah.
There we go. I communicate on a 2nd grade level. Okay. Every other word would be a cuss word if I could make it that way, but I'm trying to raise 3 kids to be better than me. So I tell the story. We did a demonstration at the Naval Academy. I was a Navy SEAL. It was kind of cool, but I volunteered for the crappy job, which was to lay explosives in the water on a dragger, right? Like, I didn't care, whatever. I wasn't out in the limelight. I had my scuba suit on. You know, we blew up the bridge. A bunch of dudes parachuted into the water. We had some guys fast rope onto the YPs and do a ship takedown. But when I got out of the water, I had like 25 African Americans around me. And so I was like, okay. And I knew, as the 8th Black officer in the SEAL teams, but I didn't understand the gravity until that moment right there. And then I realized, like, I had to start giving back. 2 of those guys went on to become Navy SEALs. And then that really started the train. 2003, I had the unique experience to bring Omega Psi Phi, which is an African-American fraternity, to the Naval Academy. Okay. And so that's when the mentorship really took root. On that 03 group of 7 guys, we have 4 Navy captains. We got submarine commander. We got all sorts of dudes. They're killing it. Same thing with the 04 line. So I formalized my process in 03 and 04 for life. And I tell everybody, I know Jeff is Navy SEAL. He does a lot of special operations, mentorship. I don't know what he does outside of special operations, but my world is 10 times bigger outside of special operations than inside. So, like, we got 250 pilots. We made 60 Army officers last year alone, 59 of those infantry officers. So outside of special operations, we have a lot of influence. We got 3 guys waiting to hear if they're going to go to Harvard Medical School this year. We have 2 guys at Harvard Medical School. So we do a lot of stuff, but all of that stuff was really formalized in 03 and 04. One of the young men on the 03 Omega Sci-Fi line wanted to go to Buds. I knew he wasn't ready. He didn't want to listen. So he promptly went out to Buds, told me he had achieved his life goal by getting through Hell Week, and then promptly got kicked out because he failed drown proofing. And that's when I made a quantum shift in my mentorship from, I will say this, I was coddling before. Coddling, trying to help, like trying to get people to understand what they needed to do, to straight fire and brimstone. Here's the program, here's the plan, you do this shit. Don't call me back unless you're running a 9-minute, swimming a 9-minute. And so after I made that change, we started printing greatness. Really, there's a hole from 05 to 08, and then we just started printing greatness. And so we've had an impact on a absolutely metric ton of Navy SEALs since 08. And then there was another monumental shift in 2017 when I was at University of Illinois coaching football. A young man wanted to go SEALs, and I had him write up the physical program that I had been given to everybody, and that spawned the PDF, which is all over the place now. But I tell everybody, like, I didn't make the PDF. It wasn't my workout program. It was the program given to me in 97 when I showed up to Buds 100% out of shape and ran a 38:50 4-mile time run and had to go into the ocean because I was about to have heat stroke, and I'd had it in Gitmo. I knew what it was. And the instructors were screaming at me for 30 minutes while I sat in the surf zone and cooled down.
That's
so
what
I
you
get
get
kicked out for heat stroke.
You're not allowed to get heat stroke on the instructor's dime there, Jake Zweig. So that actually, it brings up a good question for you, Jeff. So we talked about, and we're going to get into the meat and potatoes and stuff about how we come up with methodologies and all that other stuff here in a second, because we're going to crush that. But, you know, hearing Jake talk and hearing how he's evolved over his course and knowing that you've been out, you know, with a decade of experience kind of on the back end and having an impact that it has, how has your approach to the mentorship that you provide changed?
It's funny. Like, I'm not just like, this is not a crafted conversation, but like, I was just like Jake. When I first got out, I had a other gym business here in town in Virginia Beach, and we was just going to train youth athletes, a lot of youth athletes. I worked with a lot of pro teams, and that was like, I did a TEDx talk and all these sort of like, my ego is fucking giant and I had to go do these things to make myself feel right. And so, what point was that I coddled too many people because it was like I wanted them so badly to want it the way I wanted it because it was easy for me. I really was driven, and Jake certainly was and is. And it's like, you can't gift that to someone. And so after I started getting, like, I call like fanboys, we got a lot of fanboys, and it was just, it was so compelling to not continue down that road of like trying to want them to want it. And so I switched mine to more of like very pragmatic numbers. Like, this is what you have to get to before you, like, don't waste my fucking time. Even the guys that come train with us, we take them through a particular PST that just ensures, like, you've got to at least get to this minimum standard that we can work with. Because if someone isn't willing to do that minimum standard, we'll call it, to work with you, then then it shows me that you haven't done the time. It's the same thing. Like, the best thing you can do to a Buds instructor as a student is show them that you prepared to every level. Like, that's like, those are the gatekeepers. So if you can't get yourself to a position to go, hey, I give respect and honor to this position and this privilege, now teach me. It's like, that's what SEAL Team 6 is. It's not a deselection. The whole thing, it's selection and then training. Once you've been selected, they will give you time. And it's like that in the SEAL teams too, is Buds is a total deselection course. And so if they don't see it like that, then I can't give them that, because it was obvious to me. And for like what Jake and I were talking, it's like, the ones that know, you don't have to convince them. And that's really what we're trying to, you filter through that process first of finding the people that have that real calling. I don't have to give you that. And if I have to coerce what you perceive as a calling, you're wasting my time and you're insulting me. And you're insulting the brotherhood or whatever you want to call it. And like for those of us that made it through, it wasn't a matter of a worry. Like, was I worried about buds? No, I wasn't. And not even a little bit, because I had every intention of going through that task to get to the goal. Because I didn't want to be a career bud student. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And so you see people like with the, hey, what's it like? And were you afraid? And all those sort of red flags that go off on me now. I'm like, no, stop. Like, just, I'm not here to be your fan. Like, I get it. Like, people looked up to us, and but there's a way to garner that sort of, not adulation towards me as a person. It's adulation towards the community that they want to find. It's not reverence towards me. And like, it's real obvious now when people have that glow in the eye of the community, or that like fucking laser eye look, like I'm going to go do that thing. Cause that's the reflection I see then in myself.
And it's so hard to just take somebody. I just often wish that I could take these young men and women and just put them in my head for a second to see how I feel about it and to see my experience from it. It has nothing to do with assessment and selection. It had nothing to do with me going through INDOC. It had nothing to do with me getting to go to cool schools as a student. It had everything to do on that third or that fourth or that fifth deployment where I really had to focus and know my why and really care about what it is that we were doing and know that it was part of something greater. And I've evolved just the same as you gentlemen. And, you know, thanks to Jake and our relationship, I'll tell you what, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And I don't know how many times I've looked at people and been like, hey, you know what? Here's an answer you're probably not going to like. Maybe this isn't for you. Maybe these questions that you have, maybe those self-doubts, maybe those are valid. Because I'll tell you what, you can't say it, you can't elucidate it, you can't show somebody, but when I see it, I know it. And it's that laser-eyed look.
Yep.
It's that person that comes to me and they are running 9 and swimming 9, and they have done the work and they have come to me with smart questions. Those sort of folks are the people that you want to pour your time and your effort into. And that was a fantastic exposition about how it is. I will give you time once you've earned it. And I think it's okay to lay that line out. So that's fantastic. Jake, how was it like that first time when you went nuclear and you just decided, hey, no more coddling, no more, holding people's hands, so to speak. How did you make that right? How did you balance that between your willingness and your desire to see people succeed, but also giving them those hard truths like Jeff was talking about?
So I really had a tough one, man. 2008, I got a phone call from a lady that I've known since 1992, and she wanted me to talk her son out of going. And her son is a Billy badass. Like, his son had already, at that point, her son had done a lot of incredible college athletic stuff. Okay, All-American. And I had a conversation with him. I said, hey, man, yeah. And that dude gave me exactly what I wanted to hear. Here's why. Okay, he'd already been working in corporate America for 3 years. He was a dude. He said, this is what I want to do. So, okay. I said, I didn't have a question about the work. I've known his family. Literally, I've known his family for, at that point, 20 years. And so the odd part of it was I had to have that hard conversation with his mom. And it was, ma'am, I didn't talk him out of it. I think he's 100% correct. I know that's not what you want to hear. I know he could get killed, but you're going to have to live up to it. And she was not happy at all. And I've had to have that conversation with another mom, and she took it a lot better. The other mom was trying to get him to pray every time they got off the phone, and he's a super religious family. And I told him, you're killing him. You're killing him, reminding him of how deadly the game is he's playing. She said, I understand. And so she stopped. So, I think it goes with leadership. If I rip somebody's face off, I'm going to give them a day. I got one the other day, man. I got a young lady who's in basic training right now. She's going to be an Army officer, and she's being soft. I blew her head up, and she was crying. And then I waited like 6 hours, and I called her back, and I said, are you ready to play real games? She said, I'm sorry. It's okay. Let's go. So I think if you rip somebody's head off, you got to go back to them. But I mean, now it really just comes down to, like you're saying, the standard of they have to be at the baseline minimum to even have a conversation. I've built most of the stuff in my program Like the master class, I built a master class so I didn't have to talk to 90% of the people, 95% of the people. They can go to the master class and get the master class was made on a young man who's currently a SEAL Team 5. Every conversation I had with him, I took notes because it was pre-COVID. I took notes, and every video comes out of every conversation I had with him with his whole process through Buds. So a lot of my stuff is kind of deference in that I don't want to talk to you. So go over here and get it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly why I have a YouTube channel. Right?
Yeah.
It's because it's part of the process is like there's a lot of information, a lot of questions that I think need to be answered. But like being that repetitive rhetorical piece, like I guess social media has been that ability to like, hey, here's the videos you should listen to. And if you come with questions that are answered in there, I know you didn't listen. And like I'm already tuned you out.
It's so frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so frustrating to have to go back and spend, and people, I could rant on this forever, but this isn't about me. I'm desperately trying to make it about me. When you have somebody that asks you those questions, and again, it speaks to your dedication. It speaks to the time that you put into it. When somebody asks me a question, then I'm like, all you had to do is hit that little magnifying glass and put your search title into the search function, and you can come up with 5 hours of content on this that answers every single question. When somebody hits me with a DM and says, hey, I've got a question for you, the first thing that I tell them almost every single time is like, hey, I've been doing this for like 5 years in the space. And I will tell you right away, there's not a single time that somebody said, hey, I have a question and it hasn't already been answered. So I hope that's not the case. We're going to hop into the meat and potatoes of this, Jeff. So we've already alluded to the programs, and Jake, you have also, but man, let's talk about meat and potatoes. Let's assume that we have the world's best candidate. Let's assume that they've done all of the information gathering that they're supposed to. They've got the proper qualifications for it. So we're going to delete all that other stuff, and we're going to talk specifically about the program and how it is that we actually construct a program that leads to success. So we're going to open with you, Jeff. How do you manage your work volume? What numbers do you use to substantiate your work, your rest, your miles, all of these other things? And as briefly as you can, because I know that we have a habit of going like deep into this because this is all something we're passionate about. What metrics do you prefer to use in order to guide someone towards success?
Yeah, well, ours is again like I'm a super nerd on this. My background is also like physiology and math, so kind of like I appreciate that, and it's like back to the YouTube thing is like I like to discover and things like that and break things down. So for me, what I've just done is simply is being a background as a strength coach and being around when I went to go train for Buds, I didn't know like how I should be running, like because the 4 mile or the 1.5 miles wasn't a collegiate running like distance. So I went to the college coach and like, if it was, how would you run this? And that's where I first learned how to do reverse splits. And like, oh, that's how coaches do this. And I learned how to do work volume and mileage. And so what I did is what I do is there's a couple different places. It depends on the person. But in this case, if it's a Buds student, we're looking at what does Buds advertise of his total mileage, right? So it's like somewhere around 26.8 miles per week. And so we're looking at that and going, okay, how much of that is timed? You have a 4 mile timed on Monday. You have maybe two other training runs up to 4 to 6 miles. So I'm looking at, and they're advertising up to 10 miles running to and from chow. The 10 miles to and from chow are not nearly even reaching your aerobic threshold. So like we start calculating, okay, how much running volume to do that. But then we go, okay, we got to do rucking. So we're averaging with our mileage, we're averaging another 12 to 14 miles of rucking. We're averaging 5 to 8 miles in a pool, 12 to 13 hours a week in doing resistance training and strength endurance. So we look at that actually and go, actually, we don't do it in a 7-day work week. Our microcycle isn't 7 days, it's 12 to 14. So in a 12 to 14 day period that repeats itself, we got to populate it with 24 miles or so of running, 12 to 15 miles of rucking, 5 to 8 miles of swimming, 13 to 14 hours of resistance training, plus we need a recovery day or two. So what we do is we kind of just find and massage with a few things, because probably just like Jake, there's a lot of people that are data points. And so I've been doing this long enough now, specifically only preparing guys for basic selection or beyond. And I've got my hands on the Buds first phase manual, right? I knew the Master Chief of first phase. I've got the numbers. I've had 3 guys that we've paid basically to go through Buds and calculate how many push-ups did you do today? How much did you run? And so we're collecting that data. Everybody that we put through, we keep in touch with them and kind of see their data. And at some point, it just kind of repeats itself. But the summary is that we use this probably similar metrics. Like if you can't run a sub 830 or swim at sub 830, don't talk to me. Like you've got to put some work in there, especially with the information's out there that we've broken down so many of us. And so that's kind of what we do. Is that the hard thing is trying to get people, the people that are super motivated, we got to find some balance and pull the reins back sometimes because they will overtrain for sure. For people that aren't motivated, won't make sense of it all, and it's kind of like you just got to filter through that madness. But typically, because buds that I experienced, what Jake experienced, and pretty much everyone before us, the 16 or 17,000 graduates, have all worked on the same platform. It hasn't changed that much. And so, and I know it's kind of really gets to the point of like, there's a bunch of different ways you can get there physically. You can crunch a tons of numbers like I've done. You can just go like hell like I've done. So like I say, set your hair on fire, because I've constantly overtrained in my own right, preparing for buds. And then looking back, it's easy for me to go, well, I probably could have done it differently and not done some things. But
yeah, probably didn't need all of those things that I did, but here I am, right? But that's valid input too. You know,
right,
when you
like,
look back at it, you know,
perspective is
disclusionary
great
and
now,
yeah,
since we've
yeah,
been through it. And now we're training people, and like I can remove myself emotionally from whether they're going to do it or not. Because once you find that person, it's not a matter of running these exact miles, lifting these exact weights. It's really massaging them. So we want them to train as intensely as possible. And it's really hard to convince them to modulate that intensity between running, rucking, swimming, calisthenics, and weight training. And it's not an exact science, but I think probably Jake would, for me, it's when you see somebody do it enough, you've got this trained eye. You start seeing numbers, and you start seeing splits, and you see real common errors, and it becomes a conversational thing that can vector them in with better training, because it's not a, hey, do this 12-week program to buds and you'll be fine. It doesn't work that way. And so for me, I initially set out to write this perfect program, like this one long 360. It created more questions than answers, truly. And so what I've done is, based on what we see as a weakness with these PST numbers and their splits, and then we say, hey, do a 5RM, 5 rep max on a squat or a deadlift. Let's take exercises and give them names that we have. With the classes that we do, we have like consistent numbers that these guys that succeed hit. And so we start creating our own little metrics. Like if you have the NFL, you have the NFL Combine. The NFL Combine, they're constantly compared against those historical numbers. Right? You see the same thing in European football, and you see in all these different. And so like I've been doing it long enough that you kind of have these historical norms that for me say this person is physically ready. The emotional and mental side is something I try not to get in too much stock right away, because that comes a little bit later. But I guess I don't know if I really, it's a moving target, but essentially we use a lot of numbers that come from buds, and I kind of break it down in a way, and we throttle it up, because like we've had a cross country athlete from Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech. He could run like the wind, but he was X, so not so great in this. We had a Olympic rower from Colombia, squatted a house, but it couldn't do push-ups. And we've had double PhDs. We've had a PhD from MIT. We've had all these we've had a kid that had a high school diploma but was hard as woodpecker lips from Idaho. And you're like, where did this guy come from? And he's like squatting 3 times his body weight at 140. And you're like, holy shit. So it's metrics that we kind of calculate and get together and see norms, and we try to massage those with a conversation and coaching, I guess, is the best way I can say it.
Right. And the magic really is in the mixing. And I will say that I've said it for, I don't know how long. Like I can take any 18-year-old and I can give them the grad standards for the indoctrination course, or now for special warfare assessment selection in the Air Force specifically. And I can say, listen, if you can hit these numbers, I can train you to get there. But there are so many other factors that play into it. Jake, when you're looking at concocting, trying to find the truth in the chicken bones, if you want to say, or read the tea leaves for the mixing of what it is that you need to do, how do you manage work and volume, and what training methodologies do you use to try to get those desired outcomes when we all agree, man, sometimes you just can't call it. Sometimes that hard as woodpecker lips, which is one of my favorite sayings of all time, by the way, harder than college math is another good one. But, having some of these folks that just have it, they have that, mental fortitude. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but how do you make a physical program that supports and complements the volume and the work output that you need because you've seen it and you've actually lived it?
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say I didn't use any of the shit that Jeff used. None of it. Okay. I literally took what the 97 grad Ryan Angle, the CEO of ADS right now, one of the smartest people I know, handed me the program and said, hey, I don't know where you came from, but you fucking suck and you better start running or you're going to get kicked out of here. And so on there was the time tree, right? It had 3-5, 3-5. It was all on a piece of paper. I literally took that piece of paper and put it into this program. Now I've developed the swimming a little bit more. But other than that, like I got given a program, and that program has basically resulted in 98% graduation rate from the Naval Academy. It's the only institution metric background that has anything above a 90%. Like wrestlers and water polo players and surfers are the three top, but it crushes them too. But we all know why, right? Like these cats, you got maniacs, they're getting screened down from 120 Naval Academy graduates down to 30. So you got the country's best. Like I'm not saying that the program had anything to do with the metrics, because if they didn't have the program, they'd still have a high graduation rate. So mine was just stupid truckers math, right? This shit worked. I'm gonna give it to these guys. All right. Now, I completely agree with what Jeff is saying. Like there's only probably 10 factors that are determining across all athletic events: swimming, running, push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups. There's only about 10 things that come into play across all of them. And not even 10 factors. I'm talking about 10 for everything. One of them, like Jeff said, is like, like if you don't have the right nutrition, you ain't going to be successful. If you can't lift squat body weight, like squat, you're not going to run fast. If you're not sleeping and getting recovery time, you're not going to be successful. So just like Jeff said, like literally for me, we're running about 42 miles a week. We're going to take some down intensity weeks and run 55, maybe 2 or 3 of them before you go to buds. But a normal week for us is 42 miles. We have 3 hard runs in that time. 21-minute time tree. We want to see greater than 3 miles on that. I have a kid that ran 4.7 miles on the time tree. Now he's a freak of nature running 4:15 miles, but that doesn't necessarily mean success, right? Like Jeff had a cross-country runner from Virginia Tech. Them dudes scared the shit out of me because they always quit. They don't like to run in sand. They don't like to run sore. I had a cross-country runner in my buds class, ran like a 28-minute first 4-mile time run. It's extra long. They do everything to manipulate it. He started crying, man, and quit. I'm like, bro, you just ran 28 minutes. He's like, oh, I'm faster than this, man. It wasn't 4 miles. I'm like, bro, and he quit. I'm like, okay. So 42 miles, we try to get, like, as we're getting closer to buds, we're going to ramp up the volume and decrease the intensity. 25,000 meters a week. One of the things that I've done to prepare for this conversation was actually figure out what people are doing. So like the buds times are basically 8th grade athletic achievement for moderate individuals, right? Like I like to say 28-minute 4 mile, because you're going to be tired, so you can pass a 30-minute 4 mile. A 500-yard swim, whatever you want to say, 9 minutes, freestyle an 8-minute. You're talking about middle school time. So we're not trying to make world-class athletes here. We're trying to make athletes that can endure the punishment and still be able to produce the results on timed run and swims.
Right.
In my program, from a volume perspective, we don't spend a lot of time on push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups, because in my opinion, I don't have a single dude in 25 years of doing this that's got kicked out for push-ups, pull-ups, or sit-ups. We haven't had anybody go there really since 05. We haven't had anybody fail out for runs and swims. We all have quitters, right? Like I don't care how good you are.
Right.
Every program is going to have a couple quitters. I've had 2 kids that I have one kid that I said had a 3% graduating chance. He crushed it. I'm getting ready to have another kid who could not swim, and he'll be the first one I have that's going to graduate. But other than that, the metrics are basically, I tell everybody we want a 35-minute zone 2 run 5 mile. And the reason we say that is because a lot of people are going to try to run 5 miles hard and get a 35, but I want a zone 2 35-minute, because then you're going to be able to pass those time runs when you're absolutely crap beaten to death in buds, which is 90% of the time. And you got a little bit of extra gas when they make it a 4.25 mile run, or, the tide's in and you're running in soft sand the whole way down.
Right.
The swimming part, the swimming part is what it is. 25 miles, half of that's going to be in fins. Like, I could teach a monkey to swim with fins on. So the swimming really isn't that big a deal. One of the things I'll say I know Jeff talked about it, like getting people prepared. I think the running and the swimming aspect of it are massively overrated, because that's the bare minimum of what you got to do. One of the things that I'm going to share, since we've added getting your paddy qual prior to going to buds, we haven't had a single person have any trouble in pool comp. Not one. Like, we added it 10 years ago. We haven't had a single person have trouble in the swimming pool once we added it scuba, like going to get your paddy qual prior to going to buds. So those are my metrics.
That just takes away a big, for us, our selection is almost all water-based. For the special warfare assessment selection, the old INDOC course, everything was water-based. The second that you can kind of take the fear away from that monster being underwater, and Patty does a great job of it, it's stress inoculation. The first time that you're expected to do so in a high stress situation and you can't breathe, it's a big deal. So that's really interesting. It's really
water's
interesting
a great equalizer, right? Yeah, like
absolutely.
I think that I think both of us probably, like, you probably get asked all the time, like, how would you build the ideal buds, whatever, soldier? And so it's like, I can look back at my life. Baseball was my sport. I was a catcher. So always being in that deep squat, but also I was top 10 in the country in 1996 in 2 swimming events. So I was always in the water to stay healthy for baseball. But so I had the strong bones from being in baseball, but I had the flexibility that water gave me. And so you see guys come in and water, either they can you just hit it right ahead. It's like, it's not a matter of effort. It's a matter, can you breathe? Can you find a way to relax enough to breathe and then create that effort? Like, you take it and you're like, this guy can run like the wind, but you put fins on them or in a pool and they're just swallowing water. And it's really just an emotional disconnect at that point. So I think that's what I go along with the metrics. I agree. I think swimming is, when you put fins on somebody, you can work a lot of stuff out. But but that's the nature of the buds in your guys' world, or like the rescue swimmers and the Coast Guard. It's like, you better be ready to be stressed out in the water and be okay with it. Not a hard thing to train into somebody. So I thought scuba is a great idea. I never thought that's a really great idea to get people to, like, I just remember buds is like, people have a hard time putting a regular in their mouth and just breathing normally. And once you can go, oh wait, I can breathe whenever I want, or like, hey, you're swimming on the surface, you can take a breath whenever you want. Like, don't hold your breath. You wouldn't do that when you're running. And so it's this mental disconnect that I think scuba calms a lot of people down. It's a great idea.
Yeah, and it bears repeating before we move on to the next topic here is, and Jake, way to really elucidate that point. But man, the standard running, a 4 mile at an appropriate time in soft sand and boots, man, that's not the graduation standard. That's the everyday standard. We're going to ask you to do that sore and tired and sleep deprived and dehydrated and low on nutrition, cold weather, warm weather. It does not matter. Like, people have to really get that in their head. And we do I say the same thing. People ask me what was the hardest part about INDOC. The hardest part about INDOC was waking up at every 4 o'clock in the morning and knowing the punches in the face were going to come. They didn't care about how I felt. They didn't care if I was ready for that day. You just have to go perform. And we're going to ask you to run that standard. And that's a great point about the zone 2 cardio, a great point about mental preparation from both of you gentlemen. We're going to ask you to do that regardless of other environmental factors. And some people can handle it and some people can't. And that's one of those things that you're just going to have to lean into it. I had a very well-known mentor of mine that used to say, you can't get out of it, so you might as well get into it. So that's great. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. Jeff, I'm going to ask you, we talked about all of these things. We talked about minimum standards. We talked about training methodology. So when you look at a candidate and you're going to be like, okay, I think this person is ready to go, when do you let that person off the leash? What are some good indicators for you that a candidate is ready to go and tackle their selection of choice?
right? These guys aren't, like, here's a big one. Like the big red flag is when people ask you like social dynamic questions, what parts were made you fearful? What did you worry about? And all these sort of things. Cause to me, all I'm hearing is like, I need to front load with all this fear-based questioning so I can prepare myself for that. Like, no, like we could give you the first phase buzz manual and let you read through it. It ain't going to help you. And so I think that like, that's the big part is like, it kind of, when people start asking like real poignant questions, like in their,
did you ever want to quit? What did you ever miss your family?
right,
Same thing.
exactly.
It pricks my little ears up to be like, whoa, why are we putting excuses in there? It doesn't matter what I did.
Right?
It doesn't matter if I was sad that I was away from my kids or
No,
missed my dog or missed my parents.
nobody cares. And like, and it's not a lack of emotion. It's an acceptable disassociation. And we go like, because it's like when they start asking like, my biggest red flag is when people talk about like, well, did you have a girlfriend and how did she this and how did they that? And like, I'm like, so here's my real quick story about like, for that is like, my dad was a truck driver for 41 years. And my dad would frequent the same places all the time. I talked to my mom and dad right before we secured Hell Week. I called my dad, and right when we secured, and my mom answered the phone, and she's like, "Yeah, my dad would drive to Chicago an awful lot, deliver for Heinz foods and things like that, and he'd see the same people all the time in places he would frequent, and they'd exchange pleasantries like, hey, how's the kid, how's the wife, but you don't really know each other that well. But my dad boxed in the Army. My dad was drafted into Vietnam, and he boxed in the Army, and wasn't super excited about me joining the military, but that shifted too. Like, my dad was a very stoic, quiet man, very stern, very, very, very organized, but an amazing human. And so he saw a man he saw regularly, and the guy's like, "Oh, your son's in bud." And he's like, "Oh, your son's going to quit. Your son's going to quit." My dad punched him, knocked him out, and basically put his foot on his chest. And my mom was laughing as he telling me the story. He's like, looked at the man, and he goes, "The fucking Nichols ain't quitters." And that's what I grew up with. And so like, when people ask me like, what was it like, and was there fear based to it? It's like, man, I couldn't look myself or my father in the eyes if I had fucking walked away. Let alone all of my friends that were all American wrestlers at Iowa and things like that. Like, I didn't have it in me to not give it my all. And whether it's divine or it's given through family and discourse of my family in good way, my disposition, like, that's what I see in people now. Like, I'm past it emotionally, where I see people's disposition. If you've come from a troubled family, I'm like, Buds is you're gonna laugh at Buds, right? If you come, a lot of times you come from a favored family, it's like, all right, man, like, you've got all the t-shirts and you've got all the books and you heard all the podcasts, but all you want to do is take your girlfriend to San Diego and experience that. And then when you quit, you label it as family issues, or it wasn't fair. Little Johnny wasn't treated equally. And like, it's so overtly obvious for so many people. Now, there are people that their inquiry is genuine, but it's just naive. And there's a difference, and I'm okay with that a little bit. But quickly that naivety shifts more towards, hey, how do I get better? Not how do I offset my intrinsic fears that I can't front load. And so I think that that's the big thing, is it's the inquiry that we get that is very telling.
Got it. And Jake, your optics is a little bit wider, right? Because we have a bunch of different disciplines, and you've spent your time on this side of the fence, so to speak, of getting people to go and do a whole lot of different things. So it's not even just selection for you, but it's going into that unknown. It's tackling something that they may think is impossible. They may think there's no way that somebody like me with the background that I have, that I can't achieve this. Are there metrics that you use that you're like, nope, this person gets it? Or is it more like Jeff said, like, again, you can't describe it, but when I see it, man, I know exactly what it is, and I know that they're ready.
So it's interesting. I'm going to share a quick story because I want Jeff to feel like we're brothers. I watched my dad almost kill two different sets of people with a shovel in front of my house. Like, no, I'm not lying to you. Like, they wouldn't move out in front of our house, parked in front of our house. My dad went down there with a shovel, and like, there was 1,000 teeth in the front yard. Like, he broke all the teeth out their mouths with a shovel. So, Jeff, I'm very aware of a truck driver's mentality of not quitting.
Yep.
Right. 100%. So here's what I'll say. Believe it or not, 25 years into this, I can tell by the first mode of communication, pretty much 90% what I got. So if I get some, I don't know, 5-page text message, I got bullshit. If I get a long diatribe on email, bullshit. Okay. If I get a short, succinct message, hey, I want to be a Navy SEAL. I understand you have a program. I'd like to talk to you about your master class. Can we jump on the phone? Okay. My first response is, okay, have you watched these videos? 90% of the time, they're like, no. But they won't respond to my email for 2 or 3 weeks because I'll just look at it and they'll come back and say, I've watched all those videos. Here are my 3 questions. Okay. Answer 3 questions. All right, cool. Here's the PDF. Let me know how it goes. All right. It works the same in everything. So I have 2 rules in my program. I will never tell you to do any BS. There's no BS in anything we're going to do across the spectrum, being a doctor, a pharmacist, playing in the NFL. Like I got a bunch of dudes in the NFL right now, starting safety at Detroit, starting kicker at Tampa Bay, lineman at Kansas City. I got a bunch of dudes in the league from Illinois. Okay. Never going to tell you any BS. And you're going to do what I tell you to do, period. Like that's it. Those are the only 2 rules. And so what I found real quickly is you tell a guy, hey man, get this book. It's called Relentless by Tim Grover. Read a chapter every morning, right? Guy's lacking in some mental toughness, doesn't have that hunger to go get it every day. Okay. Read this book. I'll wait 3 weeks and I'll call him up. Hey man, what chapter did you read this morning? Oh, well, okay, cool. Don't call me again. Okay. Like I don't have a long leash. It's very short, but I can tell in the initial, like whatever the communication is, I can tell right then. And I'm gonna give you an example. This one is, so I hate to say this, but I'm gonna say it. I mind talent. Okay. Like cats taught, I said, I said, listen, man, I have access to the best talent in the country. And well, how do you do it? I'm like, I've set up a metric. I set up the system that people call me for help, figure out the how. And in the process, I get to take the best ones. So right now I got the number 1 programmer in the world. Okay. In the world, number 1. She's making $600,000 a year as a 22-year-old, graduated from MIT with 2 master's degrees before she got her undergraduate degree. I got the number 1 AI hardware tester in the world. Okay. And all the same process. Both of those people, when they called me, the first one, a little female, wanted to be a Navy SEAL, never had ran ever. Cool. Call me back when you run a 5K. 9 months later, I get a screenshot of the Boston Marathon 5K, 23 minutes. I said, okay. Now, I knew I had something, right? But the one I'm going to give you, this one, I get a message from some, I'm going to say young, 16-year-old female from UAE, and she wants to go to one of the service academies and she wants to fly. And I respond with, what's your SAT score? She responded with 1,500, perfect 800 math. I'm like, okay. So then I set up a call. I have a rule. I don't talk to any females below 18. I don't talk to any boys under 17, period. I'm going to talk to you, your parents are on the phone. So I set up a call with her and her family. Like her dad's a 53 mechanic and they're in UAE. They're from Wyoming, but I talked to her in 2 sentences. I knew exactly what I had. I had a complete rock star. Like she is an animal. She is a dog. And so one of my good friends just had a Rhodes Scholar. His daughter is a Rhodes Scholar. She is standing right next to Isabella Sullivan and she's 16 and doesn't know it. So like the ones like you're saying, both of you, like the rock stars, man, shit, they shine so bright. All I do is I just make sure I put my sunglasses on and I guide them the best way I can. Because those are the easy ones. Like she's going to get into every school she applies to. She's going to go fly whatever she wants to fly to. We're working on all that because we got 250 people before, right? Like we got guys that we know, okay, you want to go fly in the military. Here's what we got to do. We got to show up to the service academy. We want to have our private pilot's license. While we're at the service academy, we want to get another 100 hours of flying time in, right? Like all of that stuff is already built in because we've had the number 1 powered flight guy from the Naval Academy. We've got 2 F-35 pilots right now in the pipeline. We know what you have to do. If you really want to go fly fighter jets in the military, you better go fly commercial and have about 1,500 hours before you get there. But then you still got to be incredibly driven in flight school because you're going to have to beat 2 other commercial airline pilots that want to do the same thing you want to do. So all the same thing. I think the people that stand out, those are the ones that are easy. It's the next tier of guys that are not always as easy, right? Like, hey, I'm not, like, I just took a call the other day. I'm not running. My runs aren't improving. Okay. Start with food. What are you eating? Okay. You're eating pasta every day. Okay. That's my go-to, right? I know Jeff is a rice guy. Okay. Boom. Okay. Pasta. All right. Boom, boom, boom. We work it down to my man was sleeping 4 hours a night. Like, bro, you're not going to get faster. 2 weeks ago, that phone call came in. He started sleeping 9 hours a night. All the times have adjusted. He's come down, So those are the ones that I say, like that next 10, 15% are the ones where you got to do some work to make sure that they're getting what they need.
I love that you teed up the nutrition question perfectly. So it's a good time to talk to Jeff about, we're going to drill down in this, and the wrap up from that one is the very limited function that I'm here to provide. Man, sometimes the people that know that they're ready to go, and we say this over in our shop all the time, man, the attrition rate is 0 for the people that care, for the people that give a shit, for the people that want to put out and really care about it. You are 100% success rate. There is no attrition rate for people that care and for people that are ready to go. And just like you said, Jake, sometimes you can just see in their eyes, they're ready to go. And those people are ready. Like, we can't tell you, I can't tell you. I don't know how to figure it out. Jeff, let's switch gears to nutrition here. And we're talking specifically about fueling to get people to their highest athletic achievement. How is it that you like to both pre-fuel and refuel, both for recovery and performance, when people are getting ready to tackle one of these things?
Yeah, Ken, we've vector on a few things, but typically it's kind of athlete dependent to a degree, because first we got to understand what they're doing first. Because diet's one of those things where if you try to make big sweeping changes, it's actually a big emotional stretcher and they won't stick to it. So when it comes to food quality, that's the first thing we look at, especially for like what the food quality in the United States is so poor. Like, for example, asthma wouldn't exist if people weren't eating white flour, enriched flour. That's where that inflammation of your sinuses and lungs, the inflammation that creates of all those pastas and things, especially if it's non-organic. If you're eating non-organic here in the United States, it's 100% guaranteed that you're eating glyphosate, which is a nerve gas, which is Monsanto's little baby, right? So that GI distress, that inflammation distress, like, that's why so many people snore and have sleep apnea and have asthma. It's because directly from the seed oils or from the enriched flour in that processing mechanism, right? So it's literally bleach. It's bleach. It's using high arsenic, high volumes of bleach to take that brown wheat and make it white. And they did that to the turn of the century because dark bread did not look very good in newspapers. So the marketers are like, we need to bleach this so it looks palatable. And so now we have literally bleached flour and wheat in the United States, which creates so much respiratory inflammation. And that's where so many people can't run. If they're running and they're trying to improve their aerobic base and they're eating flour, they will not improve their aerobic base because of their inflammation to their sinuses and lungs. So that's the one part of, like, we try to say, hey, we try to educate. And that's a real hard thing to do because I don't have a PhD from Stanford or Stanford Medical School. So no one wants to listen to me, even if I'm right. So typically we suggest reading certain literature by medical doctors and physicians from Johns Hopkins and these places that we've worked with in teams to go, hey, if you don't listen to me, listen to this person. And then we start formulating strategy, because a lot of it is like, okay, understand we are going to go to selection and buds and boot camp, and we're going to have to eat what they give us. So we're going to play that game. But like we just had an Olympian, right, that we've trained that was in the 400 hurdles in the Olympics. So he's in Special Forces right now, SFAS. And so talking to him, it's like, we're looking at what does the highest performer at the Olympic level, what are they going to try to consume and eat? And it was a real problem in the last Olympics because there was no meat in the athletes' availability. So they made sure in France that there was no actual animal. It was a total vegan-based diet, right? Our food was held up in customs. Like, I know the dietitians, I know all the guys over there. That's who I've worked with. Keenan Robinson, who's the head of aquatics, who was Michael Phelps' swim coach. That's who I talk to about swimming. him and Bowerman. So that when I have swimming questions and dietetic questions, I go to the guys that work with their Olympians, say, what are you feeding these guys? And the problem is they're sponsored by Kraft and Kellogg's and all that bullshit too. So a lot of it's on the side trying to go, okay, I understand that that's a game and I want our athletes to perform at a super high level, but I wouldn't play games. Like I didn't even eat the food on deployments. Every 4 days I had 7 pounds of dehydrated food sent to me from my parents because I wouldn't eat the food overseas. Because it was I'm getting bullets shot at me every fucking night, literally, for 8 years on deployment. I spent 308 days gone on deployment over my last 8 years of that command. I spent almost 7 years of my life in a combat zone. And I'm not going to eat that food. I'm not going to expect my athletes to eat that food, and I'm going to educate them why. Because the food that our military gets is grade F meat, which is only served to our prisoners and our service members, right? The fake meat isn't good, all that sort of stuff. So it becomes a real uphill battle because my mom is a chef. And she followed the food pyramid. And to this day, she's had cancer 4 times. My dad died of cancer in Iowa, which is one of the most prolific places for glyphosate and wheat and corn and enriched soybean oil. And I'm not going to fucking die like my parents, and I'm not going to, and I love my mom. My dad has passed, and I have a great family life. I grew up in the Partridge family. I really did. And so I moved away at 17, went to college, and I had to start finding out how this guy, this little kid who wrestled 103 pounds his senior year, how am I going to grow? How am I going to, my only way was hard work and a better diet. And so now at 46, where I was diabetic, in a short period of time, I'm not diabetic. I don't take any medication. I don't do anything, and I feel better than I've ever in my life. And so I have a ton of energy and zest behind this, not because I'm better than anyone, but fuck, man, I was lied to for so long by my government about what to eat and how to train. And our service members, I've worked with the Yankees, I've worked with the Golden State Warriors, I've worked with J.J. Watt, I've worked with DeMarcus Ware. Those are some of my athletes. And our service members deserve more than a J.J. Watt. God bless him. And DeMarcus Ware and the Yankees and the Phillies and the Texans and all these teams I've worked with. And that's why I don't work with those teams, because they're a bunch of kids that don't understand diet and they don't have bullets slung at them. So what I do is I really adamant about how we fuel and refuel with good natural foods in this country, because that's why I just bought a 28-acre farm in Alabama, and I'm moving in 7 months to build a regenerative farm that I can get my own eggs, grow my own food, because COVID showed me a lot. COVID showed me that I can't trust anyone with my food. And
you're telling me the food pyramid is bullshit?
Right.
This is news to me, my dude. Like, imagine.
Right, the men that created the food pyramid, after they testified in Congress, ended up dead in a hotel room in London. Crazy. Ironically, right? So,
great. Listen, you want to go rabbit holes, baby? Right? I'll go deep as you want, man.
I'll bring it down.
If you want to run a podcast to be talking,
because here's the thing: it's like
this is all we talk about.
I love the privilege that I had. I really had a privilege to work where I got to work with the men I got to work on the limited bullshit that we had to eat. And look at what we all did. Look at what all these service members do that go kick ass and fly. Like, we've consulted for the Blue Angels, right? Like, all these things of like, wait, you're going to pull fucking 9 Gs and you just ate this garbage food, and like you're expecting to have a real cognitive benefit, and like you're working in vampire hours or shift work with the SWAT teams and this, and you're just like 7-Eleven taquitos isn't gonna cut it. So I feel in the same way to train with our athletes, I feel this real urge to educate them that higher quality food is the biggest place, the most substantial place, and Jake hit it too, sleep. What we eat and how we sleep are the greatest advantages in our gaps that we can really facilitate, because when someone's really tuned in, we can get them to train, man. But once we really educate them how to eat and how to sleep and how to be strong spiritually, man, now we got fucking superheroes. We got real life superheroes, right? Man. And see, like I abuse my body in a way that, like, I don't regret, because it taught me a lot, but I look back and I go, man, I undershot my capability physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually at a very high-performing place. And I don't want these young men, in a time where war doesn't get easier and easier, things don't get easier and easier. And my son's about to graduate high school, and it's like, man, like, I want to finally be a real good example, like a real good example, even if I kind of sound like I'm a bit crazy sometimes, because maybe I am. But I just want to fill those gaps of education on diet the best I can. And that leads us to better sleep. And that's a whole other conversation. Then once they're eating right, and then they're sleeping right, and then we can get them right inside. And like that's the thing, is that spiritual gap that, like, I'm not there going to teach and preach and things like that, but there's no atheists in foxholes. And these men and women deserve the absolute best and the absolute truth. And that's where, like, this whole diet montage comes from. Because I really give a damn, because these men and women that Jake and I and all of us can mentor, they really give a damn. And like, I think they deserve the best, and I think that's where my position is.
Absolutely. And somebody described it to me when I made all the same changes as you did, brother. I got there, as we all do, we get there in our own time. And I made all of those same changes as well that we already talked about. So I'm not going to litigate or relitigate really what you said there. But, somebody described nutrition to me as the molecular basis for how you are going to perform. Some people say it is you're never going to out-train a bad diet, but somebody that really keyed in with me is it's literally the molecular basis for how your body is going to perform in every single form and function is handled by three things, and you can actually affect all three of them. You can affect how you eat, you can affect how you sleep, and the only autonomic system that you have in your body that you can control, right? I can't think and slow my heartbeat down. Yeah, to some extent I can think about calming things and slow my heart rate down, but breathing, breath work, those are the only three things that you can physically control that have the biggest outsized impact on how it is that you're performing on any given time. Jake, I think you're in violent agreement. We've talked about nutrition a whole lot. So given everything that Jeff just said, number one, I'll ask for any feedback or anything that you want to pile on. And then number two, what are the biggest mistakes that you're seeing people make that are trying to train for any one of these endeavors, or really just to be a good human, to be a good example for their kids, to live longer, to be cancer-free, to get away from all of these things that we're doing that are making us sick? Because food isn't just fuel, it's medicine. What are the big mistakes that you're seeing? And what did Jeff just say that really seemed to hit home for you?
So first, let me say this, Jeff, I'm sorry about the cancer in your family. I lost my mother-in-law, grew up in a cornfield in the middle of North Carolina, and she died of cancer. And my wife currently is working for Westat on the farmers cancer study. And she's fired up every day because we know Monsanto and the chemicals and all that stuff are killing people.
Yep.
Okay. So let's transition to a little nutrition. So as a wrestler, I got nutrition class in 7th grade. I told you I'm a math and science nerd. I listened. I took notes. I was taking notes as a 7th grader like a madman because I was in wrestling camp. We had a whole nutrition class. I learned about, 4 calories for carbs and protein, 9 calories for fat, whatever. I learned all the nutrition on a truck driver's mentality, 2nd grade level. Okay. So fast forward to the program, I lean on pasta because a lot of people are going to do what Jeff said. They're not going to take the time to look at, I'm going to get lean meat. I'm going to do all this other stuff. So I just, in the root cause of simplicity, I say, hey, we eat a pound of pasta a day. We try to eat it for every meal. We try to eat it immediately after recovery of athletic events. So if I go run, I'm going to try to eat 2 cups after a run. That's going to help me in 2 hours because we try to space everything out by roughly about 2 hours between workouts, 4 workouts a day. But I want to say this because I think it's important to kind of back up what Jeff just said. I went to the Cleveland Clinic in 2018 with Travis Lively. They have the Green Beret, I guess it's the Green Beret protocol at the Cleveland Clinic functional medicine section, right? And it was incredible to watch them put up what wheat does, right? How none of the wheat is good for you, and there's more chemicals in there. It's killing all the bio in your stomach, all the good bacteria. It's killing everything. Same thing with corn, right? Like corn is so just destroyed from a corn perspective and a nutrition perspective. There's really no value in wheat or corn. And the other big one is sugar, right? And then there's really 4 because you got dairy in there,
yep.
Right? We weren't made
sure, yep.
Processed dairy. We weren't made to eat dairy. There's a reason that you can't put a a cat on a cow because it gets sick because it ain't the same kind of dairy. Now, if we were drinking breast milk all day, we'd probably be okay, but we're not. We're drinking cow's milk.
That's also a
So
completely different podcast.
Yeah,
Like we're gonna
for
have
sure.
to we're gonna put a pin in that one, homeboy.
But I'm just saying, like the nutrition. So for me, it's pretty simple. We have a thing called a food log. This comes straight out of wrestling, right? We're gonna write down every day what we eat, and then every day after every workout, we're gonna write down how we feel about that workout. It's straight. Shout out to Mike Clayton. He has this Navy wrestling log. I'm going to try to get him to make it into a special operations log. But one of the first questions it is the first question I'm going to ask you. What did you eat? Tell me what you ate every day for the last 3 days, and then tell me how you felt at each workout. So one of the things, and I don't claim to be a nutritionist. I just claim to be a functionalist. I ate pizza when I was wrestling, and I was Superman. Okay. The best Superman food I've ever had in my life was Exceed high carbohydrate. It was a pack of this, like, it's called hydrogenated corn. I don't know what it means. I just know it was 1,200 calories of nitroglycerin. But I took it in the morning after weigh-ins. I would wrestle like an animal. But what I really saw the benefits was the next day on my 12-mile lose weight run. I had some of the fastest run times I've ever had the day after a whole wrestling tournament. And I was just like, man. But I also found in college, if I ate half a pizza, I was trying to bulk up, get bigger, I'd have incredible energy the next day. Okay. Well, I know this. When I got to the SEAL teams and I tried to eat half a pizza and I showed up for a 3-hour monster mash, that shit didn't work very well. Right. So it's that cognitive ability to have it in your food log. And you're like, okay, I had a great workout. What'd I eat? What were the last 3 meals I ate, right? And so I say that a lot to people because I think a lot of times they don't have any rhyme or reason about what they're eating nutrition-wise, okay? They don't have any rhyme or reason how it's affecting them. Like for me, I got asthma. If I eat prior to a workout, I might as well take 30% of that workout off the top. I'm not going to be able to process oxygen. So I can't eat before a workout. I got to have like a 2-hour window prior to working out that I don't eat. Like if it's some real stuff, like when I went to take the PST, I got up 2 hours early and I had a yogurt and I ate some real simple carbohydrates and I crushed the PST, right? Like understanding your body. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to have a couple mock PSTs. I know Jeff does the same thing. Go out, tell me where you're at on the PST. And then I want you to prepare like you're going to take it. We're going to do a 3-day. I know Jeff has a longer deload period, but we have a 3-day deload period, right? Where you're going to go into PST. But I tell everybody, if you can't get a 9-minute run and a 9-minute swim on the PST any day of the week, then you're not ready to go. So,
agreed.
But from a nutrition standpoint, like I'm a little bit more like, hey, where's your food log? What are you eating? I preach a pound of pasta a day. If you're on the full program, because that's an amount of calories, long chain carbohydrates that are going to allow you to perform long chain carbohydrate work, which is really what we're doing in the SEAL teams, long runs, everything's aerobic. So
yeah. Jeff, I want to open it up to you here. Like what are the biggest mistakes you see from candidates just on nutrition wise? If you were going to bumper sticker it up, you had 30 seconds in an elevator with somebody to go, hey, listen, here, if you're doing these things, just stop it. Start from the baseline, right? Like, imagine going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation. That's been amazing. And kudos to both of you guys. But going back to the beginning of this conversation, when somebody hits you up on DM for the very first time, that first contact, and they say, hey, my diet looks like X. What advice would you give them? Just simple, easy things for them to immediately fix their diet.
First one is I would say, like, again, Jake's right. Like most of the time they're not even really aware of it. Most people skip breakfast, which is a big problem for a lot of people, like especially like they're trying to be performance enhancing. That's like, don't skip meals or fast unless required. Most people don't really consume water. Like as a whole, like that's a big surprise. Like they think water-based drinks, but not water. Like a lot of water, sugar-based drinks. We don't even allow Gatorade, Powerade, energy drinks. Like I was sponsored by Monster for 3 years, and like energy drinks, and I was the guy that's like, well, it wouldn't be on the shelf as it wasn't safe. I was that asshole at one point. So my point was like, now it's what's your water consumption? You're right. What like in a perfect world, yes, you wanted to do a log, but in that quick conversation is like, are you skipping meals? Are you actually eating food? And are you considering snacks as food and things like that? Like, are you eating actual meals? You don't necessarily sit down, but are you eating a portion of protein, portion of fat, and a portion of carbohydrates for every single meal? And you should be. There should be a balance. And I think that's a lot of people just don't have a balance. They're not aware, really, probably. They're not drinking enough water. And then it bleeds into a lot of other stuff like improper. If you're going to snack, here's some good snacking options like, rice cake and peanut butter and fruit and things like that. Like, when you start giving people better snacking ideas, they tend to like stop snacking incorrectly and will tend to focus a little bit on meals. But like, I think that's the big thing too, is like discipline. If you're not disciplined enough to accommodate good eating practices around decent or good training, then you're like, are you still in? Or are you just like still blowing smoke up my ass? And I think
it's so frustrating, isn't it? Like you literally control what you put in your face, and you tell me you can't put the right thing in your face. You're telling me your own body isn't important enough for you to be disciplined on what you eat. It is the most frustrating conversation to have.
Don't expect high performance with low performance fuel and practices. Like, you're a Ferrari, you're a freaking Lamborghini, but you're putting cat piss in your engine. Like, stop doing that, So I think that that's the thing, is there's a lot of want, and when people are doing it for real, you see them make those changes, and you see their food log really improve, and then you're like, wow, your performance even got better, no kidding. And then it begs the next question, like, hey coach, what can I do more? Oh, let's talk about sleep, let's talk about this, let's talk about breathing, and then the whole thing begins to enhance as a whole, instead of like this singular lane of performance that was totally rooted in bad training, bad diet, or whatever. It's all connected.
So you're telling me it's all connected, and that's it's almost like you guys understand where this conversation is going to go, and just organically you're helping me move it along. So Jake, I'm going to open this one to you as we kind of close up here. We've talked about, those 4 aspects. So, physical, spiritual, mental, social, sociological preparation for, when is it that we're going to be ready? How is it that we train? What kind of methodologies do we put in there for mental preparation? And from the mental preparation aspect, or from that optic, from your own view, how important is mental preparation? And I'd like to ask a question as a teaser. I believe that mental preparation is the most important thing. I believe that you can overcome things like being a small 140-pound wrestler that's, fluctuating in weight wildly to go be a football player. I believe that as a son of a trucker growing up in Iowa with the worst possible food and every glyphosate that you could possibly shove in your face for your entire life because you're following the food pyramid, I believe that you can overcome those things with mental preparation and grit and determination and these other aspects of mental preparation. How important is it to you, the mental preparation aspect, and where would you rank that in physical, emotional, spiritual? Where would you rank that if you had to put it on a list?
So I'm just going to say this. Obviously, we all going to say it's number 1. And it's really not even number 1. It's 1 to 9, and everything else is 10. I showed up to Buds 100% out of shape, came off a ship for 3 months. Now, I was on an all-Navy wrestling team in May, and my grit had me running at night, speed trees and stuff like that. Now, here's what I'm going to say. This generation is absolutely in the absolute trash can. I imagine it could get worse. 77% of this current generation is ineligible to serve in the United States military. It's the highest rate it's ever been. So when people talk to me, I got some flack today, okay? Dude talking about why you got to work in construction.
You got flack?
No question.
I can't believe it.
No question. Why do you got them working construction for 2 years? Because they're all called to duty like little children. Like, they never played outside. They weren't on sports teams. They want to go be Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Green Berets, but they don't have any. Like, I look to the left and there's no grit in the background. None. And so I know for me, like, I mean, dog, I got raised by a truck driver. Shit, we ain't had no money. Dude refused to work. Like, every other year, he'd take a year off, okay? Like, we chop wood, 5 cords of wood every winter. Like, that shit ain't get chopped by itself, right? We needed a rock wall built in the front yard. Who built the rock wall? I didn't build it, but I sure carried every fucking rock down there 70 yards so that my dad could lay rock when he got home from work, right? Like, I had an immense amount of grit when I got to high school, and then I went to Jay Robinson's intensive training wrestling camp. I went to 3 wrestling camps or 4 wrestling camps. I wrestled all summer. I wrestled all spring, right? Like the grit just kept getting more and more. And then believe it or not, like I went to the Naval Academy, I couldn't read. And like if I didn't have no grit, I would have just bombed out of that place. Cause there were so many times I had to like, and I'm not gonna say cheat, but like I had to do dumb shit, like memorize an essay, 1,000-word essay, word for word, so that I could write that shit down on the test so that I could actually have a chance of fucking pass. So in my opinion, like the mental preparation, I don't even call it mental preparation. You either have grit or you have to develop grit, or you will have no chance to be successful in the arena that we're talking about, which is special operations.
Yeah, and I mean that's a perfect segue, Jeff. You served at the highest level, solving national problems at Def Group. Like you obviously have the experience of, just like you said, deployed for more than 7 years and having extended deployments and having to overcome things like that. How important was that mental preparation, not only in you, but looking to the left and to the right? As you're in those formations, you see people not only, okay, I'm sure you knew other wrestlers. I'm sure you knew other people from, shout out to the Big Ten. You grew up in Iowa. I grew up in Ohio. Of course, you're going to have those things that you see in other people, but that grit, that resilience, that determination, how important is that to you, not only on those teams, but in those situations where it feels like the world's going to fall down on your head?
Yeah, it's really, I experienced the absolute opposite of a cliche, but I did experience a cliche too, of like the idea that, I took bullets, took rounds, buddies of mine did, while I'm clearing buildings, like on multiple times, right? Like, and you really, when you actually get to live out like clearing a hallway when people are actively shooting you, and your buddy's barrel is literally next to your face taking shots, and you're completely comfortable with it. Like it gets to a place of like recklessness that's, from a personal standpoint, if someone's looking at it, you're like, that's completely reckless. But in the actual activity of that environment, it was normal. I needed a barrel there because it told me that this was normal, right? That scenario. And it's like, I got to live with people and work with people and do enough repetitious work that became normal. And being able to do the things I did with bad guys in the room, with other people next to me all the time, and making that normal, that was a big emotional hurdle for me for getting out. Was like that sense of purpose was gone, that ideology a little bit, and that was a hard thing to transition. But now that I look back at it with such reverence, and like Jake says, right, it's like there's something about it that I tell people, my wife taught me this. When we get people come in, we're like, okay, like who here has family, this, that, and the other? And we're like at mom, dad, and like you're close to mom and dad. And I'm like, okay, do you love your mother? And they're like, yeah. And I go, prove it. And they're like, there's a knowing, there's an absolute knowing that they don't need to prove, and I can see that they love their mother. In the same context, are you really committed to this? Prove it. And a lot of people like are confused by that, except for the ones that are like, yeah, I'll show you, motherfucker, I'm ready. And so like back to your chopping wood scenario, I got back from my very first deployment, and it was October, and I went back to Iowa, November, December timeframe, and my room is in the basement underneath the kitchen. My mom has this big heavy duty country Hoover vacuum that's loud and just shakes the floor. Well, she came downstairs. My mom would go to work about 3 o'clock in the morning to drive to university. My dad always was up by midnight, so he couldn't sleep. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was one of those really cold days that you're like, you're going to chop wood, because the coldest days it's easier for the wood to split. So my mom comes down and she's like, hey, get up and go help your dad chop wood. And I'm like, Mom, I'm 25 at the time. And my mom,
I just got back from deployment, Mom. Give me a
I
break.
just got back from deployment, Mom. I'll help her later. And she's like, okay. So she walks upstairs, takes the vacuum, puts it right above my room, plugs it in, turns it on, and walks out the door and drives out of the driveway. So I have to get out of bed, go upstairs, and she put a sticky note on there and says, get your ass outside and help your dad chop wood. So that's how I got raised.
I love it. I
don't, and when I go home to this day, it's like, I'm going to help my mom do dishes because I love her and I appreciate so much of what she's given for me. And I appreciate all the fucking spankings that she gave me because I deserve them. And that's how I am. And I think that Jake is right on, man. We have just a bunch of soft, soft humans. But the thing is that there are still those meat eaters that show up and just want to rip things apart. And that is why I do what I do, because through all this madness that you and I and all of us see, like scratching our head going, is this world really coming to an end? Is this is crazy? And like all this stuff. And you're like, through all of this madness, there's still really good humans that call us, email us, knock on our door and go, hey man, I'm serious about doing this. Let's do it. I'm like, well, I guess we're still doing it. And so that for me is there's still a lot of hope, even in some of the madness. And it's all mental. Like it's the bricks are all the skills. The mortar is what holds it all together, and that's the mental piece. Because without that development, and we'll get to that, because I'm gonna see if you can train and work hard, and then can you focus on diet, and can we improve your sleep? But every aspect of human performance leads to one position. What's going on between your brain? What's going on with your breath? And how are we going to link those two together to handle manage the stress? And at a highest level that I got to experience, we wore heart rate monitors on target. And my heart rate in a firefight averaged 86 beats a minute. That's where I sat at. I'd walk in, my heart rate would get up to 191, 178, and through the mountains of Afghanistan, carrying an 82-pound ladder on my shoulder for walking 14 kilometers a night. But I'd get to the ready point, the call would go out. I was the master breacher, lead breacher, whatever I was at the time. I'd set the charge on the door, my heart rate would settle. Blow the door, rounds would come through the door, and we would just sit there. And I remember my troop chief one time, he's like, let those motherfuckers inside sort it out first. And they just rounds would come through the door. We'd wait for a mag change. We'd clear and shoot them in the face and be done with it. And that is what I did every single night for years. And I learned through these heroes how to manage and breathe through these positions of stress. And I was gifted in a way to work really hard, but I found myself around a bunch of really great humans that helped me harness that fire and helped me calm myself down so I could make decisions. And now it's like there's some really gifted people that I know Jake works with on a regular basis, and that's the coolest part, is to see these humans go. They manifest these talents before I could, and before I could recognize them. And that's the gift, is that if being a teacher was good enough for Christ, it's good enough for me. And if I can be a teacher to these young men and women, then man, am I blessed. And so that's what I love doing. And I know that's where all of us that teach these young men and women, that's where we meet. And that's where I choose to meet Jake. I choose to meet Stu Smith. I choose to meet all these people that, like, we may not get there the same way, but I'm certain that we give a damn.
I was going to ask you to go ahead and give me a summary as your final, but you just hit a walk-off home run. I'm just happy that I shut up long enough to let you do it. Jake, you got any final thoughts, brother, before we close this one up?
Yeah, man. Hey, Jeff, what would you give to chop wood with your dad for one day again?
Right. Like I was going through a transitional period emotionally where I got to be there when my father died. My mom was holding my dad's hand asleep when he passed away in his sleep. My son and I flew in. I got to see it, but to your point, like, there is some wisdom there, sitting in a truck by himself silently for year after year after year, that, like, man, like, my dad, probably like your father, had some real deep wisdom to share. And I was too cool to ask. Maybe his generation was a little bit too jaded a little bit to kind of open up. But I think that's the gift we get to give our families, right? Like I amen to that. You amen to that. Yes.
And it's the gift that we owe, not just get to give, but as GWAT veterans, of people that have this experience, no matter what it is that we've done, whatever selection courses or cool guy schools, we owe it to this generation to give them that experience, to give them that wisdom. And I just want to say thank you to both of you, Jeff, Jake. You guys crush yourself every single day. You do not have to. You've done so of your own accord, and you do it for a righteous reason, which is when you want to pour your experience into other people in hopes that they're more successful than you have ever been. You want people to learn from you so that they don't have to learn like you, which is amazing. And I hope that everybody out here that has listened to this amazing conversation over the last hour and a half, I hope that that's what you take away. Jeff Nichols, Jake Zweig, thanks so much for the conversation. You guys absolutely crushed it. Everybody, make sure you're following Jeff and Jake on their individual socials. I'll make sure to put it in the show notes. I want to say thank you for the opportunity, gentlemen, for being here and being able to be part of this conversation. Not only did I learn, but I'm humbled that I get to call you both friends. Thanks for your service. I appreciate you. Everybody, have a great one. We will see you next time.